Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. The topic of today's presentation is the case of Indonesian language policy. And in this presentation, we are going to see that how the language policy was formulated in this area and whether it was successful or not. At the end of this, I have also included concluded remarks from some scholars who have researched on the language policy of this area. We can see that in the map that Indonesia is not the name of just one island or just one country or just one place. We can see that Indonesia is basically a group of islands. There are lots of uh, different islands and they were united together in Dutch rule. So these are going to be our discussion points: nation building, language planning. Here comes status planning, corpus planning, acquisition planning, and then finally we have concluding remarks. We can see that basically it was formerly called Indian Archipelago or East Indies Islands. And we can see the etymology of the name, that how it was coined from the words Indo and Nizos Island. Here we can see that we have got the national capital in Jakarta, and there are several provincial capitals. We can see in these circles are for the provincial capitals, towns and villages, international boundary, and then we have got main roads and railroads and major airports. So this all wide portion is that of Indonesia. We know that earlier this Timur state was included in Indonesia. It was invaded and then it was independent. So it happened in the history. So basically, it was not a one nation, but under the rule, the rulers tried to uh, make it unified for their own purposes, for their own agendas, and it was a Dutch colony, and it was difficult for the rulers to unify this multi-ethnic state. So they tried to have one language, like they used Malay as the second official language of the region. And when the Dutch left, it was the medium of education after independence as well. Bahasa Indonesia was a variety of Malay, and it was considered because because of its vulnerability among other regional languages. And people had no objection of using Malay as their official or national language, or the Bahasa India, the variety of Malay. So let's have a look at the status planning, corpus planning, and acquisition planning. So we can see that Indonesian was made the official language with full constitutional support, and they tried to make one language for one nation because it was very much important to have one language so that people could communicate with each other and with the government. So the Indonesian or Bahasa Indonesia was the language of literacy, modernization, and the symbol of identity and patriotism. And basically, because of this reason, this status planning, uh, there was a spread of Indonesian language as per the census, and it increased gradually. But the important thing is that these results are not very much um, appreciated, and some people think that these results were very much controversial, and there was not much increase in the speakers of Bahasa Indonesia or Indonesian. So, if we come to the corpus planning, we can see that the corpus planning was a classic top down operation. It was not a bottom up, slowly moving from bottom to top. It was a top down operation, it was enforced to the people, and we can see that they managed through different ways, though there was divergence, there were different varieties, high form and low form, because of this standardization process. But it was said to use the high form or good Indonesian, so that the people feel that there is another thing, literary Malay in the high form and the Bazaar Malay low form. Basically, Bazaar Malay was the lingua franca of intergroup communication, and this situation was the major cause of diglossia in the region. So we can see that there was a rift in the situation, and people who were using this Malay or Bahasa Indonesia were again have this problem of high form and low form. So if we look into uh, other things, like if we see that there were many problems, and uh, you see that those differences were problematic for the student who were learning those languages, and the divergence was in the lexis and pronunciation as well, because there was too much influence of regional languages. And researchers highlight official efforts to promote standardized language as good in Indonesian in the wake of building national identity. And because of this major aim of unified culture, one nation, one language, like this all colonial mentality or their stance, it was just planned over here. So basically, this diglossia situation was faced because of this. Some people were having low variety, and some people were having high variety. And people who were having low variety as their lingua franca, they felt that they are marginalized and they are considered inferior. If we look into the acquisition planning of Indonesian language policy, we can see that at that time, earlier when it was enforced, there were not much teachers trained in standard Malay, and it was unavailable. Teaching materials were not available as well. Though this problem was just focused in one time period of the history, and after some time, teachers were trained in Malay and they were able to train well, but the whole education system was centrally controlled, and all the citizens were not independent. And we can see that Jakarta has become monolingual with full acquisition of Indonesian as first language of people in the town. But again, if we have the case of monolingual, we have the case of bilingual students who are having competency in Indonesian and their own regional language. At the same time, they were the people who developed a hybrid language, and they were mixing high and low form, and it was all because of the standardization process, because the standardization says that it's another language or it's another form. And the history tells us that standardization was a bit strange to the native speakers, and they were considered that which language is there, where it's spoken. So it was not very common at that time. So let's see that what were the important policies and decisions. Basically, in the beginning, we can see that there was Dutch colonialism. In the Dutch colonialism, the Dutch was the major language being used, and the Malay was the second official language. And when there was Japanese occupation, in the Japanese occupation, Japanese also accepted Malay as the official language. But the important thing was that it was the elite groups or some powerful people in the area that who were promoting good Indonesian since 1988. And both of the main rulers, Soekarno and Suharto, both were trying to have the national unity under the rule, so that people could have good Indonesian or one language under the one rule. And they had single model of education system run from Jakarta, and there were monolinguals, multilinguals, and bilinguals at the same time, and people were using hybrid language because of this high and low form. There was also a purist movement, yes, indigenous speakers, and the purist movement says that people should have pure language and they should not mix the words in that pure language. Just like we have this idea of standard English or RP and purism, stuff like that. Then we see that there is political and economic crisis of 1990 and the rethought of knowledge economy, globalization, and English. So at that time, the powerful people, policymakers were able to realize that the system is not working, and they need to think about other things as well. So let's have a look at this in a six step model. Dutch colonization, Malay Bahasa Indonesia, Number three, literary Malay, standardization process happens. Number four, purism. Number five, monolingualism, bilingual and hybrid. And number six, globalization, English. So the role of the English is not very much in this area, and we can see that people now turning towards English for the purpose of global communication and knowledge-based economy. Basically, if we look into the first part of Dutch colonization, we can see that it was made out of different islands and it was not united anyways. So they had different languages, different religions, different culture, everything was different. But they tried to manage it so that they could have a unified nation, so that they could control them well. In Malay was accepted in almost all times, like in Dutch time, in Japanese time, and later when it was independent from any other outside force. And basically, all of the rulers over there in Indonesia, they were having this motto of one nation, one language, Bahasa Indonesia. So they were focused on this, and it was very much appreciated by some. Basically, it was the lingua franca as well. Malay was not a new language. Basically, 9th century inscriptions show that Malay was in early use on Java as a language of literacy. But when we look into the standardization process, we can say that there was a difference, literary Malay and Bazaar Malay. So we can say that when it was a difference, when this difference was created, it was not very much successful. And there was a campaign of speaking good Indonesian again for the standardism purist movement, but it was not working as well. So in this situation, where people were so much confused that whether they should have one language or two languages or three languages, students were able to mix the sound, mix the words from each variety, high form and the low form, and it was not possible to understand that who is speaking what. Finally, if we see that English was not very much accepted in Indonesia earlier as much as it was accepted in Pakistan and India and some other countries where there was colonialism and basically there was Dutch over here, and after Dutch there was Malay and Bahasa Indonesia. There was no place of the English, but then they felt after the economic crisis, they felt that it's not possible to have this thing, and they always wanted to improve the economy because it's very important to survive in a global world. And there were also many groups, ethnic groups. They were reacting to centralization and nation building. They were not very happy because they had different culture, they have different ethnic identities. So they were not very happy about this one language rule. So we see that pluralism was considering this idea, uh, considering this idea that one nation ideology is not supported, and there should be other choices, and there should be some room for improvement, and uh, the rulers should listen to the people of the country and respect their choices. If you look into the Act 1999, we can see that it gives the right of autonomy, but this right is linked with the provision of the funds from the local government or from other funds. At that time, we can observe that Javanese and some other people in the Indonesian islands, they were rethinking about their languages for literacy, and they were feeling that they were marginalized. So they started teaching the children in the schools from their own language. Uh, Harris et al. Observed and compared the language policy of Philippines and Malaysia with Indonesia. He was able to Imagine that both Philippines and Malaysia were in a better, far better economic position because of English, a global foreign language, because they were also offering education to the students from Asia and Middle East. In Malaysia, they're offering quality education, they're advertising it well, and now people are turning towards this country. Even from Pakistan, people go there for improving their studies, for higher studies as well. And Philippines is just like providing labor to the Americans, to the Europeans, and even to the Middle East, and they are supplying labor force over there, and it is all because of the lingua franca, because of the global language. They can communicate well in other countries other than their own country, and this is not possible for Indonesia. So if we see that foreign language policies are, if its policies are not adjusted and the people are not given a chance to have to improve their economy, then these things might be very much unsuccessful. Rights reservations are possibilities in the future, yet the predicted decline of Indonesian has not yet begun to occur. But there are signs of it. Yes, we can see that. Gradually, people are turning towards globalization. In some islands, they are no longer using Indonesia as their language of education. So we can see that this is the age of postmodernism or the age of neoliberalism, where everyone has access to the global communication and social media, and they know that they need to survive, and they want to do anything for improving the economy of their country or the economy of their own family. So thank you so much. It was all from my side. These are some suggestions derived from the scholars who were able to compare and contrast and see the language policy of Indonesia over the years. We can see that uh, if Indonesia is able to have this foreign language policy, then they might not have to sacrifice one language policy, and it could be just like a second language in Pakistan and some other countries. Postmodernism opposes the universalizing of arguments and positions, and in the age of neoliberalism, where linguists have more knowledge of the language planning failures than ever, it seems impossible to enforce political decisions on general public. Though it's happening, it's still happening. People uh, are supposed to obey what is being coming towards them, and they were told that you have to do this or they have to do that. And in some cases, people are happy at that because they want to grow economically and they want to have better earning. So if it is the case of the global language, it is happening. We see that in some countries like Ukraine, Turkey, and and yes, we can say that it is Malaysia. They are offering lucrative things to the students coming from all over the world, and students are going over there. So they are completing their education, higher education over there, and they are being taught in different languages. And they are also learning the language of that area. Like if there is a student who want to do medical in the Ukraine, he has to learn Ukrainian language. If a student is in Turkey, he has to learn Turkish language. If the student is going to Malaysia, he has to learn the Malaysian language as well. So it goes side by side with the foreign language. Thank you. It's all from my side. Allah Hafiz.